truth is buried under layers of silence for security reasons, therefore insecurity. We are broadcasting from an undisclosed location. This is Akashic Echoes, a curiosity-fueled dive into the strange, the hidden, and the wait, what? Corners of human history, where Alex asks the questions others won't. Dr. X opens doors you didn't know existed, and Titus keeps things just grounded enough to follow the thread. It's part investigation, part storytelling, and part late night. What if everything we know is slightly off? We're not here to hand you truth, wrapped in certainty, only to spark thought, entertain the mind, and maybe raise an eyebrow or two. So tune in, enjoy the ride, and remember, take everything with a grain of salt, preferably the size of a small asteroid.
Tonight's story doesn't just question history, it questions reality itself. Because according to one of the strangest accounts of the 20th century, a naval experiment didn't just attempt invisibility, it may have bent space, distorted time, and left behind consequences no one could fully explain. So here's the question: did the Philadelphia experiment actually happen? Or is it a story that became more real the more it was told?
What is the Philadelphia experiment? Allegedly, it was a U.S. Navy experiment conducted in 1943, designed to make a ship, the USS Eldridge, invisible to radar. But the story doesn't stop there. According to later accounts, the ship didn't just disappear from detection, it vanished.
Vanished, as in visually invisible, Doc?
More than that. Witnesses claim the ship became surrounded by a greenish fog, then disappeared entirely, only to reappear moments later, sometimes described as being seen miles away, before returning.
That already pushes into extreme territory. But the real claims go further than that, don't they?
Much further. Some accounts suggest crew members experienced severe disorientation. Others claim something far more disturbing, that sailors were found, partially fused into the ship itself.
That's the kind of detail that makes this story either deeply unsettling or deeply unreliable.
Or both, Alex.
Titus,
To ground this, there is no verified military documentation confirming the Philadelphia experiment as described. The story largely originates from a series of letters sent by a man named Carl Allen in the 1950s, and inconsistencies in his accounts raise serious credibility issues.
so we're not starting from official records, but from testimony that emerged years later.
Yes, which doesn't automatically make it false, but does make it unstable.
Let's separate the layers. Is there any real science that could have inspired this story?
There were experiments during that era involving electromagnetic fields, degaussing ships to make them less detectable to magnetic mines. There were also theoretical discussions, Einstein's unified field theories, exploring relationships between electromagnetism and gravity. But turning a ship invisible, or teleporting it, that crosses from experimental physics into speculation.
So a kernel of truth, surrounded by a much larger narrative.
Exactly. And once a story enters that space, it evolves.
Let's address the persistence of it. Why does the Philadelphia experiment continue to fascinate people decades later?
Because it touches multiple boundaries at once: technology, military secrecy, and the possibility that reality itself isn't as stable as we assume. It's not just a conspiracy, it's a disruption of what people believe is possible.
And it introduces something else: fear of unintended consequences.
Yes, the idea that even if such an experiment were possible, it may not be controllable.
Titus, some pointer?
From a scientific standpoint, there's no credible evidence supporting teleportation or human object fusion as described in the story. But the narrative persists as a cultural myth, blending real science, speculation, and fiction.
So we're dealing with something that lives between fact and folklore.
And those are often the most powerful stories, because they're never fully resolved.
Let me ask directly, do you believe anything like the Philadelphia experiment actually occurred?
Not as it's commonly told, but I do believe this. Experiments have been conducted that pushed beyond understood limits, and sometimes the stories we hear are distorted reflections of something real, but not fully revealed.
So not teleportation, but not nothing.
Exactly.
A ship that vanished, a crew lost somewhere between matter and myth, and a story that refuses to disappear, even without evidence strong enough to anchor it. So we're left with this. Was the Philadelphia experiment a failed leap beyond physics, or a story that grew because it tapped into something deeper, our suspicion that there are limits being tested, far beyond what we're told? And maybe the strangest part isn't whether it happened, but why the idea feels just believable enough to linger. In the end, the Philadelphia experiment sits in that uneasy space between documented science and enduring myth. A story rooted in real wartime technology, yet stretched by decades of speculation into something far more extraordinary. Whether it was a misunderstood experiment, an embellished account, or something deliberately obscured, its power lies in the questions it leaves behind, about secrecy, perception, and the limits of what we think reality allows. Because sometimes the most persistent mysteries aren't the ones we can prove, but the ones that feel just plausible enough to never fully disappear.
This has been Akashic Echoes. Stay curious, stay aware, and remember, take everything with a grain of salt, preferably the size of a small asteroid.